Now, Rassie, would you tell us your full name and when you came, where you were born, and then when you came to Louisville?
My name is Henry Rasmuson Hawkins. See, my grandparents were named Rasmuson, you know.
Oh.
But when I went to school here, see, there was my brother and I. We come over with the grandparents. And
where did you come from?
we come from Northumberland, England.
Oh.
You know, we immigrated, and but you see, Seidels were here before us. You know Seidels, don't you?
Yes.
And well, they was here about 2 years, I guess, when they got us to come over. See, because I never could understand why my grandparents come over here, because they were, in a way, they were well fixed over there, a whole lot better than they ever was over here.
How many were there in the family?
In my family?
Uh-huh.
Well, you see, it's a long story.
Were there?
See, I lived with my grandparents.
Oh, I see.
And they lived in a seacoast town. And my mother, well, just my mother and one of my brothers and the other brother. I had two brothers, see. Mm-hmm. And one come over here with me and my grandparents, and the other one stayed with my mother. Mm-hmm. So we never did find out what the deal was, you know. But my grandparents lived in a little, well, in Blyth, that's what they call Blyth, right on the seacoast. And my grandpa had a job. He used to be a sailor. And I don't know if you want to put all this on there.
No, I just wanted to check this too.
Well, anyhow, after he'd done his, Navy service, and he'd worked on these windjammers, you know, with the sailboats. And, of course, he was pensioned off. And he had a job as a night watchman on the dock. You know, when the boats come in, the big boats come in, they'd park them. Well, it's like parking the car, but it's not a boat. I don't know what you call parking a boat. So anyhow, he had a job.
Come on.
And then, of course, the whole thing started when, we had relations over here in Louisville, you know, Robertsons.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
what we used to call George Robertson.
Yes.
George Robertson. He was my grandmother's, well, his father and my grandmother were a brother and sister.
I see.
And when my great-grandfather died, and he had some property over there, see, and the oldest son inherits the bulk of the estate over there. And if the oldest son is dead, the oldest son is dead. Now, the oldest son was over here, see, and that was, let's see, was his name George, too? Well, anyhow, George Robertson, he was the son of the eldest son. So they had to send for him to come over there. Now, he was working in a mine over here, I think, Correction number 2, you know, at that time. He was in
How old were you when you came to Louisville?
When I come, I was only about, I'd say, between 10 and 11 years old.
And did you go to work in the mines immediately?
Oh, no, I was only about 10 years old.
How old were you when you went to the mines?
Well, I was about, when I went in the mine, well, let me tell you about my grandfather first. That year, 1909, we come here, see, and the mines were going pretty good, you know. So my grandfather got a job at the old Heckler. You know where the old Heckler was?
Yes.
Over there by the plant. And he worked that winter. Next winter, the strike come on. So that finished his mining career. So then we bought this little house here. Of course, it's bigger now because I fixed it over, you know. And so that was all they had to, there was no work, you know, and just when we had a greenhouse on this place then, and he used to, we used to have flowers, and in the yard we used to grow vegetables and stuff like that, you know. So then,
what do you remember about the 1910 strike?
Well, just that we was poor, you know, and the union kind of helped us out, you know. We was on a dole, I think, as far as I remember. I think the children got 75 cents a week, and mother got, or they got, you know, the female, they got $1.50. Let's see, what is it, $1.50? I think we got $3 a week between us. I don't know just exactly how it was decided now. And then once in a while they'd give us a pair of shoes, a pair of overalls, or stuff like that.
Did you feel that you gained, that anything was gained by the 1910 strike?
Well, of course, I was just, I was only about 10, 11 years old then, you see.
Right.
And as far as doing my parents any good, no. They didn't do them any at all, no.
Mm-hmm.
No. And of course, during that strike, why, they had, you wouldn't remember that, but they had military in here, you know, down by the Acme Mine.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, then they had the mines over here, they were all, you know, were, let's see, on the other side of the wagon wheel, or let's see, what am I going to call it? It's been a different wagon wheel. Where the wagon wheel was, you know, right
yes,
across there.
over on
that whole
Hardy's
territory, that
place.
was where the mines
Yes.
were. That is,
Yes.
the Louisville mine.
Uh-huh.
Outside. Then the Acme, of course, started after they settled the strike a little bit. Each mine started going. The Acme started, but I think the Masters up here. You know where the Masters was? It's up here about a mile, straight up, and they started first. And of course, we had a cooperative store here. That is, the miners had a store here, and that was in the block right in front of the show there. Right in front of the show. You know, when I was down that day, I told you the wrong place.
Oh.
It was down right in front of the store, the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Tony LaSalle's old place. Yeah.
Oh.
And we had a store in there. My uncle, that is the ones that come over here before, about 2 years before us.
Mm-hmm. Robinson's?
No, not Robertson.
Not
No,
Robinson.
their name was Seidel.
Oh, Seidel. I see.
John Seidel and his family.
I see.
And of course he was a big shot in the local, in the union at that time, and he was the manager of the store. They had him for the manager of the store.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny Porter, he's dead. Oh, you know Johnny Porter, don't you? Johnny
Yes.
Porter. And he worked in the store with me, and I was you might as well say the errand boy.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we didn't have any phones at that time, and that was my first job in the morning. Of course, I'd have to go wake the horse up and feed him, you know, and then I'd go around and take the orders, you know, just with a pad in my hand, and then I'd come back, and we'd fill the orders. Well, I had to go down to the depot and get all the stuff. It never used to come in by a truck then. We used to get it by on the depot, in the boxcars, you know. And I had to go down and unload the boxcar and bring it up to the store. And then in the afternoon, after we got the orders filled up, well, then I'd take it around with the horse, you know.
What were you paid for this?
$5 a week.
That's big money.
So then...
how long did they do their groceries this way?
They what?
How long did they deliver groceries like this?
Oh, let me see. Well, let's see. Carvette and Dalby had a store, you know, right where McSoney's that's right next to the show, you know, that,
Yeah.
Dalby's had a store. Dalby's and, Carvette and Dalby it was at that time.
Yes.
Of course, the big store in the corner where the rugs are now, that was a company store.
Right.
Yeah. And then, and after, let's see, Carvette was in there. And then John Steiber took it over when Carvette went down in the corner. John Steiber had the economy store there. And then Masoni bought the economy store from John Steiber. See? So, of course, I used a horse and wagon and he used a truck, you know, a Ford truck.
But who did Jim Fabrizio work for?
Jim, yeah. He worked for McCorkle, the city market, you know. And my brother, Rick, he was a butcher in there at that time. And, of course, they had another meat market before that with Robert Thurloway. You don't remember Robert Thurloway. He was down where the bug, right in, let's see where the town hall is now there. You know, the old where the town hall is. They had, Ostrander had a bakery shop on the corner, then there was a barber shop, and then there was this meat market and Robert Thurloway. And then the drugstore.
Who owned the drugstore? at that
Well,
time?
let's see. Who owned the drugstore at that time? Well, Bobby Jaco run it for a while. I think Bobby Jaco was the one that had that put up. Huh? And then they sold it to Drunkenmeyer. Drunkenmeyer was in. And then, of course, the town bought the whole package, you know, everything.
Now, do you remember more about the 1920 strike, or 27 strike?
The 27th strike. Well, I happened to be working at the State Mine at that time. I was working on top. And when that strike came on, and of course we had to quit. And during the time that we was off, my brother-in-law, Henry Porter, and his boys, they, we put in most of the old sidewalks in around town, you know. And at that time, we got a contract out there to, not I, but I mean Henry and his boys, you know, and I just worked for them.
I see.
And we put up the bases for the highway mine tipple. That is, they was building it over, see.
I see.
And we worked during that strike. And I remember that they had, they just let them operate that mine during that strike to get coal for the schools and the miners, you know. And all the other mines were shut down.
Well, then up until that point, there were no sidewalks in Louisville.
Well, no, that's when they put an ordinance through to the sidewalk. And let's see, I think that went in on, part of it did, because this part of the sidewalk here, I remember it cost us $100 to put this big sidewalk in here. And then during, if you remember, during let's see, when was it? The Depression. You know, we had
Yes,
that Depression,
yes,
you know, and there was no work
right.
around. And President Roosevelt, at that time, he made them go back, take the machinery out of a lot of places, you know, and go back to handwork. So they put in this side of the sidewalk for just practically the cost of the concrete, of the cement. Of course, the labor was paid by these, the CCC, you remember the CCC?
Oh, yes.
When a lot of the kids went up in the mountains, you
Right.
know, and they had these projects around. Well, they cleaned the reservoir up, I remember at that time, on that grant, you know, the grants that they give the towns at that time. And let's see, what else did we do? I think they put a bigger main in, because I remember I and my brother, they'd give you the length of your block, and they paid you 50 cents an hour for to dig the dirt out, to put the bigger pipe in. That's when they put a bigger main in.
Oh.
At that time. And that was a grant too, I think, to help the work business, see?
Who was running the city at that time?
Well, at that time, let's see. I think it was Bill Jenkins, I think he was the mayor.
You had the mayor council system.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I was on the mayor for 8 years. And Heinman was the mayor when I was
Jim
on.
Heinman.
John Stevens and Frank Rizzi and Joe Porter and Art Johnson and George Ellis. And George Ellis was the mayor after Heinman, I think. He was the mayor pro tem, and I think Heinman died, you know.
Yes.
And then I think George Ellis took it for a couple of years.
Rassie, through all of this, do you feel that that at that time then that the unions did any good for the miners? They're coming in.
You mean
and the strike?
Better our situation?
Yes.
Well, I think yes. It give us an insight to the credit. That's not that's the worst thing I think that ever happened to it. You know, it was in a good way, good in a way, but now
were your
before
working
that,
conditions improved?
before that, we didn't know what credit was. You know, I know my grandparents. If they didn't have the cash, they didn't want it.
Well,
And
I
we,
meant
of course,
more
we didn't
along,
have anything.
along the line of working conditions.
Oh, the working
and this
conditions.
type of thing.
Oh, I think yes. They, but not as far as. Well, all this black lung come out of that. out of the work, you know, when we was working in the worst condition. And of course they claim that we haven't got it, but the way they're dying, why, you know, you just, well, you can feel it yourself. You don't have to have a doctor here. You can go down, you can see all these coal miners. Well, look at now. This is a town of widows, you might as well say. Down this block here, I bet you there's 10 widows. Down this block, there's 10 widows. And a coal miner, look at it there now. The span of a man's lifetime, you know. I think a coal miner's the shortest, you know.
Well, what conditions did you work under?
Well, bad air, water, and of course at one time, at one time when I first started in the mine, you could only shoot, that is, your powder. You know, we used to use a lot of powder, and we could only shoot when everybody was out of the mine. See, if we worked on the day shift, the night shift would shoot the coal down. And if the night shift were, well, they'd come in and cut the coal at night, say, and then they'd have to shoot it. Then you weren't allowed to shoot the next day at all. So after a while, they got so they let us shoot it at noon. See, just at noon. And if you got your place cut by noon and shot at noon, well, then you had something to do in the afternoon. If you didn't, why, you didn't get anything work till the next day. And of course, there was no union then, you know. And boy, there was, well, the Monarch Mine, say the Monarch Mine now, just for instance. Well, they had the store out there, they had the schoolhouse, you know, everything out there. You remember.
Right, I sure do.
And
Mrs. Goodhue told
of course, if you, well, they wanted you to, well, not exactly, they didn't force you then to buy your stuff at the town, at their store. But to a certain extent they did when the Rocky Mountain had that. You know, they had the big store on the corner there where the rug store is now, see? And you were just obligated from there to buy there. But then these other stores were coming in, you know, like Carvest and at that time. So, but out the Monarch Mine, I remember they had a lot of, well, they had these strike breakers out there, you know. And of course they were mostly single men, you know, there wasn't very many families out there. And they, well, we used to, well, after a while, of course, I loaded coal over there. But then they dock you, you know, till, well, practically you didn't have anything coming. And if you did have a money coming, why, they wanted you to buy scrip. They'd give it to you scrip at the store. Now, if you wanted cash, well, they'd knock 20% off or 25% off for cash. Oh, we had terrible times, like, you know, that was just, of course, I was young, but I remember some of it, you know. Of course, that got a little better after they kind of unionized after, that is, we had 1668 in here. But then it dropped out after a while again. They got too strong, the operators. And then we had a strike in, I remember we had another strike in 22. And we was going pretty good then. Of course, the war done a lot for the coal miners because they was dependent on the coal, you know, for the...
Is this World War I or World War II?
World War I. World War I, yeah. Yeah, I remember then that, of course, I was exempt on account of having my grandparents was old then, you know. And me and my brother was the only support. So then after we got to start to work, why, then we had to support the old folks, you know. So then in 1920, well, we'd got a raise in 1917, and of course I was exempted on account of being the sole support, you know, practically. And I got into 4F. Of course, my brother was in A1, but he never got called. But I got called, and they said, well, I wouldn't have to go right away, but I'd have to, see, I was still an English citizen then, you know, a British citizen. So then they said if I'd take out my citizenship papers and swear allegiance, you know, like I'd be ready to go to the if they called me, you know, which they did. And it so happened that I got called. I was put in A1 again. See, after my brother got killed. My brother got killed in 1920 in a mine accident.
Which mine was this?
This is Monarch.
Now,
Monarch,
which brother?
My second brother. That was John Hawkins.
Oh.
Yeah, he was around 19, 20 years old, just young,
Oh.
big, strong fella. But he got caught in the mine shaft, you know, and killed him instantly.
Oh.
So of course I was.
Excuse me, but that's not the same accident that Tom Stevens and all of them were.
No.
This was a different one.
Oh yes,
Monarch.
yeah, that was
And
when
about
the
what year
mine. That
was
was an
this?
explosion in the mine at that time.
Right. Now this
Now
one
this was
when
just an accident, daily accident. You see, they didn't have these automatic bells and stuff. You know, when you want the cage to go up, you had a signal for the engineer. Well, on one side of there was two cages, like the coal went on both sides, and then you'd stamp on a bell on one side, and the cage would go up. The other cage would come down. But on the rock, see, they had a lot of rock in that mine, and they only had to cage it on one side. They could only dump it on one side. See, so they had to take the car over and reverse it on the other side. See. While my brother was doing that, a piece of rock must have fell off the car or something and hit this bell. You see, the one they step on. And the engineer took the cage away, and he got caught by the chest here. Just dragged him up the shaft.
you said this was a daily accident.
Well, not a day. I don't mean
but,
it. No,
but
it was
you
just
saw a lot of accidents.
well, just an accident that it could happen every day. But of course, they at that time. It was well, I had more dangers in the mine then than I have now, you know. Of course, the young fellas, I know there's dozens of fellows, young fellows got killed at that time, you know. And on the mules, with the mules. You see, that was awful dangerous, you know, the hills, and of course the gas in the mine, and the coal dust, and you know. And well, of course, you know a lot of the people that got killed at that time. Helen Lago's brother, Dominic Lago.
He
Just
wasn't.
young fellas, 18, 19, 20 years old. Yeah, my brother was 19 years old. Yeah, I'll show you a picture of that mine. They used to sit on the board, you know, and put the feet on the wheels. This thing was like a gun. You've never seen one, huh?
No.
Well, there's not one laying around here. But in the old days, they used to have a flat board, and we'd set the flat board on up the coal, like that was the coal, see? And then you'd have the board just like a Gatling gun with two handles on it. You'd hold it like this, and then you had your triggers and things for your well, there was just one for the air. You had an air hose on there. You had a block made out of like a stirrup, and you'd put it on your foot, and then you'd put it against the wheel like this, see? So when you could hold a machine. You see, that machine used to go like this, and then there was a pick, what they called pick, about this long, and it was shaped like this, and that was digging the coal. See, we put that in and put a pin through it. That held it on the machine. Then when when the pick got dull, we changed it. See, but we used to hold that thing just like this. See, and it was work, believe me. And that thing would be punching around. Well, we'd move along. We had a helper. You know, there's a man helping us, or you know, somebody to help us. And we'd move the board along till you get about 20 feet. 20 feet, which we'd call a room. And about 12 feet, we'd call an entry. That was the places where, well, that was like a limb on a tree. The main limbs on a tree would be about 12, like, you know, and then they'd branch out like the limbs on a tree, see? And then after we'd get as far as we was going, you know, we had to have supports while we was going, you know, like timbers and stuff like that. Then when we'd come back, we'd go as far as we could, like to the boundary, and then we'd start back. Well, then we'd start chopping everything out, see, and coming back this way, and the place would be caving in on us all the time. Now
How
you
did
see.
you know what the boundary was?
Well, of course, we had engineers,
Oh.
and they used to go around with a transit, and they'd mark everything off.
Oh,
You
I
know,
see.
we every day, like I was an entryman, see. Well, we had pegs in the roof, and we'd sight, you know, and that would be the center of the place. Well, then we'd cut. When we'd cut, say 6 feet or 12 feet rather for the entry. And then a room was the same thing. We'd go 20 foot for a room, see. And then when we'd come back, we'd take everything that was there, see. And then we'd place a cage. Of course, we had timber. We had to timber these mines, and then we'd knock the timbers out, and then that'd cave in, you see. And then that part of the mine was done. But the only thing about that mine, that's where the gas used to come in, see. You had to watch that. Then we had to seal it up with concrete and everything like that, see. Yeah. So these miners here, well, now that was the old buckets. You remember the old?
Yes, I sure do.
Had
Daddy
water on the
still
bottom,
has one. Mhm.
water on the bottom, and then sandwiches or whatever, you know, in the top.
If you were lucky.
Now,
I've
here's-
got to go open up the library, and she's going to keep
Yeah.
with you.
Oh. Well, you know some of these fellas on here. You know, here's Rosser, Louis Rosser.
Oh,
Yeah, you'd know a lot of these people on here because you've been here for quite a while. See, when did you come here?
well, I was 18 months old,
Oh,
and when we came in about 1930.
1930. That late? Oh.
See, but Daddy,
Well then.
Daddy,
Well, that car here, this is an engine house here. There's an engine in here in this
Yes.
house. And this Carl used to run that. I used to run that too myself. And that pulls the car out on the dump, then the dumps itself, then the car comes back. You've seen that big dump, that red ash dump like a Monarch, that's it, right there.
Mm.
Yeah. And of course we used to drop, see these cars here?
Yeah.
We'd get the cars way up here. They were on a grade, of course, and we'd bring them down and load them right here in front of here's where the coal used to come up, you know.
Yeah. Now this was the tipple.
This is
and,
tipple, yeah.
And this is where the men went into the mine and through here.
Right through here. That's where the men got on. See that opening there?
Yes.
Well, that's open, you know, back of this house here.
Yes.
And then there's two cages there, and they used to get on and go down the cage, you know, in the mine. And then, of course, the cars used to come up with the coal and dump them. That's why I was telling you about this rock, see? It had to be dumped on this side because here's the rock. We couldn't dump it on the other side because we couldn't get it over. See, so we had to dump it over here. Yeah. So, yeah, these are all fellows. This is stuff here. You wouldn't know them though. They're old time. Here's Ann Ferrari. You know,
Oh, yeah.
he's pretty bad now too. I guess
Oh,
he's. I think he's bedfast. He can't. Here's another Rosser, Louis Rosser.
Oh, yeah.
This is a Harris, and there's quite a few, and they're all gone now. This is a LaSalle right here.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a few of them LaSalles in here. Yeah. This old fella here, he used to own putting all those houses down by the mill there on the one side of the street. Old Giles was. Well, his son built. Well, you wouldn't know that's an old telephone office there. You wouldn't know that either. The old telephone office is right in front of your office now.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You remember,
Across the
you
street,
don't remember that. That's the old telephone
Yeah,
office.
I know.
Well,
I've
that's
heard
not
that.
the first one,
No.
but that's his son. He was a bricklayer,
Oh.
and he lives in Denver now. Well, I think he's dead now, of course. But this old man used to own. Well, at that time, I think there were company houses belonged to the company, and he bought them. You know, Giles was his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he, you know where Ansel Garrett lives? Ansel Garrett, and down on that street, County Road going out that way. We're right in front of Otto Schreider. There's 3 or 4 houses in there. They were all the same kind at one time, all the same thing at one time. Yeah. And he used to own all them. And his son built that telephone office for Rome. They built it for the old telephone office, you know, used to be right in front of the show. At
Yeah.
one time, just a little bitty building, just
Yeah.
a little bitty building. Yeah.
And then it burned down, didn't it?
Well, the garage next to it burned down. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. 23. No, I think this mine burned down. I forget when it burned down. But it was a catastrophe at that time because all these men were from town and nobody could work while they were putting that mine up.
The Monarch.
Yeah, the Monarch,
Really?
yeah, it burned down. Yeah, just from this coal dust. The coal dust explosion they had in the tipple, No, this is a new tipple.
Mm.
The old tipple, let me see. I got some pictures of the old tipple somewhere. But that's when we used to, these cars used to come up. And we used to have to pull them off by hand. And then dump them and put them back on again.
Mm.
That was the old tipple.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they built this here part of it, why then they called that self-dumping cages. They were self-dumping.
Mm.
At one time I was the only one up in there, and the cages would come up and dump. Now the coal would go out. Sometimes it'd stick, and we had to pry it out with a bar or something like that. Of course, we had to stop the engineer at that time. That's where those bells come in,
Yeah.
And at that time, of course, say I was the only one for the company, and then of course we had the miners had a check weighing. See, I had to weigh the coal.
Oh.
When the coal come up, see, they dump in a basket, a hanging basket up in there, and then it'd weigh the coal. We had a scale up there, and then after we get the weight on the car, why then we trip it and the coal would go out. See. And then another one would be coming up. So then, but at the time before this though, there used to be 4 of us up there. 2 on back pushing, and 2 in the front pulling, see? And then the 2 would pull it across the cage, and the 2 would, we had there was a track, like a track, and then there was what we call a gooseneck. And the gooseneck was built like this, see? And it kept the 2 front wheels like that. And this thing would go up, and we'd be standing on, we'd go up with it, and then we'd pull it back, and then they'd hook it. These 2 fellows on the back end, they'd have a hook. They'd hook the car so we could get it done quicker, And, of course, we used to haul, let's see, quite a bit of coal out of that mine, by the hand. And then when it burned down, of course, we couldn't, let's see, we had to build a table up on top, and like we were this here thing here, we had steam in here. This was run by steam and air, of course, the air compressors, and the steam was for the boilers. That would for your. I think that's before they got the motors on the steam run the hoisting machine at that time. So then. They had, I think I had 4 boilers there, 4 boilers or 6 boilers. And they had to be fired like by hand. So then we had to have a thing up on top, one for the rock, so we get on one side, and one for the coal to come in here to the boiler room, see, into the boiler room. So they built right in here, before this was built, of course, this is a new one. They had a station right up in here. And we had a track like these old tram cars used to have. You remember in San Francisco, the one, they turned the whole car around? Well, we used to have to turn the coal car around too, see? And then of course, we can only dump the coal from one side because the car had the door was on a swing, see? The door would open up, But at one time we had doors, we had it just swing. It swing, and we had a bolt to go through, Of course, they got away from that. So they put the hooks on the side of the car, just like a baby buggy, the top of a baby buggy. It'd swing up like that, and the coal would go out. Then when we pull the car back, it'd go down and lock itself, see? Because it was made out of iron, and the car was made out of, outside the wheels, it was wood. We had wood cars then. We'd make them out of oak wood. Used to make them out to the mine. So, so then they had to have this runaround to put the coal in the boilers, you know. So, of course, it was a lot slower, you know. And of course, after we got the self-dumping cages, and then another thing, I happened to be, well, at this time, I was running a boxcar loader. This here where the boxcar is, see? Right on the, well, it's not under there now. It's out from under. There's another boxcar in there, behind here. See, see, there's the boxcars up in here. We had a whole string of them, and as we loaded one, we'd drop it out. See, and right under here now, there's a boxcar, and the boxcar loader was in there, in the car. The new ones, see, the other one was made out. It was steam, and I used to sit on a like this. I had a seat, and I had my, you know, like controls in the front, but I didn't have to go in the car. I put the loader in the car, but I didn't have to go in the car myself. But when I got this new one, it was an endless chain. You've seen these like a tractor? Like a tractor. And that coal used to come down the chute and get on this belt, and then you'd make it go one way, and you'd make it go the other way by reversing it, you know. And it'd run the coal up on the, and you could raise it up, and, you know, lower it from the bottom and raise it up. All by hydraulic then. That was when hydraulics was coming in first. But I was in the car then, practically in the car, see? And look at the dust I used to get. Well, I got some pictures somewhere. I'll show you them things that we used to wear. I used to have a thing, a muzzle, you know, with a screen in it, like a pig snoot. And we used to have to wear goggles. And that's why I say the mine, well, of course, we had the different kind of machinery that we got. Why, of course, we had to have different ways of combating it, you know. And boy, I used to come home at night with, well, of course, you couldn't, well, I had a breather. That was the snoot was, you used to change those pads in there, you know. Had a screen in there. And I used and then every once in a while I'd have to wash them off and dampen them, you know. But they weren't very nice to wear, I'll tell you that, of course. And then we used to wear them down the mine too, on the machines. After they got the machinery, we used to have to wear them in the mine too. But still we got the black lung. No, I remember, of course, I see where it would go down, you know, not like if you quit today, you was working today and quit tomorrow. Well, of course, I think it took me, as far as I remember,